Authorities expected to find smugglers at a routine checkpoint. What they found was a shocking discovery. An 11-year-old American boy with dual citizenship, confessing without emotion to cartel-ordered beheadings. Born in San Diego, he should have been in grade school, not a central figure in Mexico's most infamous child assassin case. How does a United States minor become El Ponchis, paid thousands per hit by powerful cartels? The answer starts long before his first kill. Edgar Jiménez Lugo was born in 1996 in San Diego, California. His birthright gave him American citizenship, but his life never matched the promise of that passport. From his earliest days, Edgar's family was fractured by addiction and crime. His mother, Yolanda, was arrested in the United States for cocaine possession when Edgar was still an infant. She was deported to Mexico, and she left Edgar and his sisters behind. His father, David, drifted in and out of the picture, and he was himself tangled in drug use and legal trouble. By the age of 5, Edgar was separated from his mother and living in Jutepec, a town near Cuernavaca in the Mexican state of Morelos. The household was a patchwork of relatives, most notably his grandmother, who took on the role of caretaker. But the stability did not last. When his grandmother died in 2004, Edgar was only 8 years old. With her passing, the last thread of adult supervision snapped. The children were left to fend for themselves, drifting between relatives, sometimes sleeping on the streets, sometimes in crowded, chaotic homes. Reports from those years paint a picture of neglect and survival. Edgar dropped out of school after the 3rd grade, saying he simply did not like studying anymore. Teachers and neighbors recall a boy who was quiet, withdrawn, and often hungry. Food was scarce. The streets of Jutepec offered more than just danger. They became a classroom of their own. Without parents or guardians to guide him, Edgar found himself exposed to the rhythms of street life. Petty theft, hustling for coins, and the constant presence of older kids already running errands for local gangs. No official records from San Diego or Morelos document Edgar's early years in detail. What is clear is that by the time he was 11, he was already considered easy prey for crime. The dual citizenship that might have opened doors instead became a footnote in a life shaped by abandonment and poverty. Edgar's earliest memories were not of schoolyards or family dinners, but of empty houses, lost caregivers, and the struggle to survive day after day. In that environment, the line between childhood and adulthood blurred quickly. The groundwork was laid for what would come next. Edgar's name never appeared on a class roster again after 3rd grade. By 9, he had vanished from the system, another missing face among the children who slipped through the cracks in Jutepec. His absence barely registered. Teachers remembered a boy who never brought lunch, whose uniform was always a size too small, who left school one day and never came back. Official records list him as a dropout, but the truth was more complicated. With his grandmother gone and no steady home, Edgar drifted between relatives' couches and the street. Hunger became a daily companion. Some days he waited outside bakeries for scraps. Other days he followed older boys through the market, learning which stalls to avoid and which vendors looked the other way. Without adults to shield him, Edgar gravitated toward the only structure available: the loose network of street kids and hustlers who survived by their wits. He started small, running errands, carrying packages, keeping watch while others snatched wallets. The line between mischief and crime faded quickly. At 11, Edgar was picked up by local police for robbing a small business. The arrest didn't last. Under Mexican law, he was too young for prosecution. He walked out of the station with a warning and a reputation. Word spread fast that he was willing to take risks, that he could be counted on to keep his mouth shut. The streets offered no second chances. Each day brought new dangers: fights over food, threats from older boys, and the steady lure of easy money. Edgar learned to read faces, to sense when trouble was coming. He grew quieter, more guarded. Neighbors recalled seeing him alone at dusk, sitting on a curb, staring at nothing. Some pitied him. Others kept their distance, wary of what he might be learning from the older teens who now treated him as one of their own. By the time Edgar turned 11, he was already marked by the streets, resourceful, hardened, and invisible to the people who might have helped him. The safety net that should have caught him had long since unraveled. In this world, vulnerability was currency. For a boy with no family, no school, and no future, survival meant accepting whatever came next. On the outskirts of Cuernavaca, the rules of childhood did not apply. Edgar's life changed forever with a single encounter. According to his own account, he was just 11 when a black SUV pulled up beside him. The men inside were not strangers, their faces already known across Jutepec, enforcers for the South Pacific Cartel. One of them, Julio de Jesus Hernandez Redila, called El Negro, would become both captor and mentor. Edgar was forced into the vehicle. There was no negotiation, no chance to run. He later described it as a levantin, a snatching that was as much about power as it was about recruitment. Inside the car, Edgar's world shrank to a handful of threats. The cartel did not need to explain what would happen if he refused. They already knew everything about him. No parents, no home, no one to report him missing. But they also knew his weakness, his older sister. She was already under their control, and her safety became the lever they pulled. If Edgar disobeyed, she would pay the price. His first days as a captive recruit were a study in psychological warfare. The cartel did not hand him a weapon or a target right away. Instead, they gave him errands, fetching groceries, cleaning up safe houses, delivering messages between gang members. These jobs seemed harmless, almost mundane, but each one was a test. Obedience brought food and a bed. Hesitation meant beatings or threats against his sister. El Negro watched every move. He set the rules and delivered the punishments. Edgar was told to call him Tio, uncle, a twisted attempt to mimic family, even as he was stripped of any real sense of belonging. The cartel's logic was simple. Break the boy down, then build him back up as something useful. The tasks escalated. After a week, Edgar was sent to act as a lookout. He learned to watch for rival gang cars, to spot police patrols, to memorize license plates in seconds. Every report was double-checked by older recruits. A single mistake could mean a beating or worse. His sister's presence was a constant reminder of the stakes. She was kept close, sometimes forced to help dispose of evidence, sometimes used as bait to ensure Edgar's compliance. The promise of escape faded quickly. Edgar realized that the only way to survive was to follow orders. The boundaries between victim and participant blurred with every errand run, every secret kept. The cartel watched for signs of resistance, and Edgar learned to hide his fear. Within days, the errands gave way to new lessons. El Negro began talking about weapons, about loyalty, about the price of betrayal. Edgar was no longer just a boy on the streets. He was being shaped into something else, one command at a time. Cartel training did not look like scenes from a movie. It started with a promise: $3,000 for each life taken. That number was not just a reward. It was a payment. For a boy who had begged for bread, the stacks of bills felt unreal. The first payment came in cash, counted out in front of him, a silent contract. The message was clear: loyalty had a price, and so did betrayal. Edgar's days blurred into a strict routine. He woke at dawn in a safe house, where windows stayed covered and doors locked. Breakfast, if it came, was instant noodles or stale tortillas. Then came the drills. The older men ran him and the other recruits through military-style exercises, marching in line, learning to take orders, and standing still for hours. If anyone broke formation, the punishment was swift: a slap, a kick, or worse. Mistakes meant extra drills or cleaning blood from the floor after a beating. The only way to avoid pain was to follow every command, no matter how small. Weapons training started almost as soon as Edgar proved he could keep quiet. At first, it was just watching how to hold a pistol, how to load a magazine, how to aim without shaking. The guns were always real, always loaded. The older recruits would fire into the dirt, then hand the weapon to Edgar. He learned to shoot at bottles, then at stray dogs. The line between practice and cruelty faded quickly. Obedience was enforced with both fear and reward. On the nights before a killing, Edgar was given marijuana to smoke. The cartel called it medicine, something to steady his nerves. He later said the drugs made it easier to do what was asked of him. The first time, his hands shook so badly he could barely hold the knife. After a few hits, the fear dulled. The men watched him closely, making sure he finished the joint before handing him a weapon. If he hesitated, they reminded him what would happen to his sister if he refused. Money changed everything. Edgar's first payout was more than his family had ever seen at once. The cash was not just for him, it was a warning. Spend it, and you will want more. Refuse, and you will lose everything. The cartel kept him close, never letting him out of sight for long. They bought him new shoes, a phone, even a video game console. Each gift was a reminder, you belong to us now. The conditioning worked. Edgar's world shrank to a handful of rules. Do what you are told, take the money, numb the pain. The drills, the drugs, and the constant threat against his sister erased whatever was left of the boy who once waited outside bakeries for scraps. By the time he was ordered to kill, Edgar did not flinch. The cartel had finished shaping him. He was no longer just a desperate child. He was a weapon for hire, and he knew exactly what was expected of him. Edgar Jiménez Lugo's crimes left a trail that even hardened investigators struggled to process. At just 11 years old, he was carrying out beheadings for the South Pacific Cartel. These acts were documented not only by his own confession, but by videos and photographs found on his phone. These were not rumors or street legends. Mexican authorities confirmed at least 4 beheadings directly linked to Edgar, each one carried out with a chilling detachment that defied his age. He described the process in interviews after his arrest. Victims forced to kneel, a knife drawn across the throat, heads severed in a manner meant to inspire terror. The cartel's orders were clear: make it public and send a message. Bodies were dumped on roadsides outside Jutepec and Cuernavaca, sometimes left beneath bridges for the world to see. These were not anonymous killings. They were staged executions, designed as warnings to rivals and the community. Forensic reports from Morelos and Guerrero prosecutors tied Edgar to these crimes through digital evidence and his own confession. On his confiscated cell phone, authorities found videos of him beating victims, posing beside corpses, and carrying out the beheadings. One clip that eventually surfaced online showed a boy in a mask methodically decapitating a man while others watched. The footage shocked even seasoned investigators. This was no adult Sicario, but a child acting with a calm that made the violence more disturbing. In his confession, Edgar did not flinch. He admitted, "He matado a 4 personas, los degollaba. I killed 4 people. I beheaded them." When asked how it felt, he said, "Al principio sentía feo, luego ya no." At first it felt bad, then it did not. These acts were not isolated. The cartel used Edgar's youth as a psychological weapon. Witnesses and survivors described the horror of seeing a child carry out executions. The message clear: no one was safe, not even from those who should have been protected by innocence. The public display of bodies, sometimes hung from bridges and sometimes left on busy roads, became a trademark of the South Pacific Cartel's campaign of fear. Each murder forced authorities to confront not just the brutality of the cartel's methods, but the reality that children could be turned into executioners. The evidence left no doubt. Edgar was not just a victim of circumstance. He was an active participant in some of the most violent crimes the region had ever seen. On December 3, 2010, Mexican Army soldiers stationed at the Cuernavaca airport stopped a teenage boy, his two sisters, and a cousin as they tried to board a flight north. The soldiers already had a name, Edgar Jiménez Lugo. He was just 14, but his face had become notorious in Morelos. In his backpack, authorities found a cell phone loaded with videos and images, evidence of torture, beheadings, and bodies left on highways. These were not rumors or internet hoaxes. The digital files matched the confessions that would follow within hours of his arrest. The prosecutor assigned to the case later described the evidence as overwhelming. The phone's memory card held not only the acts themselves, but also the faces of cartel members, locations, and even Edgar's own voice giving orders. For investigators, the footage stripped away any doubt that a child had been at the center of some of the region's most publicized murders. The videos that had first circulated online, dismissed by some as staged or exaggerated, were now confirmed by the very person who appeared in them. But the law had its own boundaries. Under the Morelos Juvenile Justice Code, anyone under 18, no matter the crime, could face a maximum of 3 years in a juvenile facility. There was no legal path to try Edgar as an adult. The prosecutor called the statute increable, a word that echoed the disbelief of the public and the press. 4 confirmed murders, multiple acts of torture, and a confession that left even seasoned police silent. Yet the penalty would never exceed 36 months behind locked gates. In the weeks that followed, the case files grew thick with interviews, psychological evaluations, and statements from officials. Edgar was ordered into a juvenile detention center. There, he learned to read and write, attended therapy sessions, and waited for the calendar to run out. The families of his victims, the soldiers who arrested him, and the prosecutors who built the case all faced the same reality. The law was written for children, not for child assassins. The evidence was clear, the crimes undeniable, but the punishment would always be capped by age. For Edgar Jiménez Lugo, the legal system offered both a shield and a loophole, a gap between what he had done and what the state could do in return. Right now, thousands of children remain trapped in cartel violence, often recruited younger than El Ponchis ever was. As both governments struggle to address this crisis, the weaponization of childhood continues unchecked across borders. The reality is stark. When the world looks away, innocence is not just lost, it's deliberately erased. What will it take to break this cycle? Share your thoughts below.